Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the iESE annual conference. I'm Councillor Paul Bettison, and I have the pleasure of being leader of Bracknell Forest Council, as well as being chairman of iESE Limited, the parent company responsible for all of iESE's pro bono works, its research, and its sharing of best practice. This week's free conference is a part to share best practice. So, welcome once again. I too am looking forward to learning more at what I know will be a great conference. Now, I'd like to hand you over to David Tutt, my co-chair of this iESE conference. David.
Thank you very much, Paul. And let me add my welcome to that of Paul. As he says, my name is David Tutt. I'm leader of Eastbourne Borough Council and chairman of iESE Transformation Limited. iESE Transformation is the organisation that channels all of our help and resources to iESE members. If you're an iESE member already, thank you very much. And if you're not, we would love to welcome you into the fold. Together, we're far more capable than we are individually, and we're rightly proud of the many ventures that we have pioneered together for the sector on every aspect of local public service across the UK. We have a variety of services and resources available for you. Here in Eastbourne, we've built a studio which acts as the hub for the event, but online we also have a variety of useful information and facilities for you. So please explore the online videos and other information, as well as the delegate information online networking. Throughout the next day and a half, we'll be exploring how we as a sector can create not just sustainable councils in what we all know are really challenging times, but also how we can help to ensure that our communities are sustainable too. The sessions are designed not just to explore the latest best practice, but also to give a platform for further research. So look out for the opportunities to participate and learn from them what will be best practice for the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Come and join us. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the conference. In this plenary, I'm joined by Councillor David Tutt, who's just welcomed us. I'm joined by John Comber, who leads the iESE research programme, former Chief Exec of Royal Borough of Greenwich. And online, I'm joined by Jonathan Huish, founder of Avanti Transformation, and also very experienced in terms of leading the independent peer review work for the Local Government Association. So between the group of us, we plan to just explore some of the common themes that will be coming up through the conversations that we have over the next day and a half. We were preparing an introduction for this morning and thinking about the challenges for local government, any one of which would be worthy of a conference in its own right. And when we got to the end of the list of doom, we were thinking this wasn't perhaps the way to energise the conference, but it is in one of those areas of difficulty which I've been leading on, cybersecurity. It's important to understand the breadth and depth of the issues in order to break it down into bite-sized chunks and actually manage the problem. So we will spend a little time exploring some of those challenges in order that we can pick up the threads and follow those through the conference to the solutions. So we live in interesting times, as they say, the ancient curse, war on European soil, global cyber wars, dealing with a pandemic which still hasn't gone away, and of course significant climate change behind that, all of which combines and creates a challenging financial environment. So perhaps, we start with yourself, Jonathan. Actually, even prior to some of those challenges emerging, In your home neck of the woods in South Wales, you've been dealing with some long-term structural economic challenges, and perhaps you might just say a little bit about the background to those, and we can start to tease out some of the ways in which you're starting to find new ways through those challenges.
Okay, so some of the challenges do go back generationally, in fact. We live, my area is Rhondda and Taff. We live in one of the poorer parts of Wales and indeed of Europe. We were in receipt of European funding back in 2000. We were one of the first ones to receive that. That lasted for 14 years. And actually, since those times, things haven't improved a huge deal, to be honest. And the recent turbulence in terms of the impact of Brexit, the impact of the Ukrainian war, cost increases, cost of living crisis, and ever perpetually reducing budgets are creating challenges for authorities as well as other agencies across the whole of Wales. The challenge that we face is one of multiple complex issues landing all at once, and for communities and leaders and chief execs and organizations finding a way through that in a structured way and not knowing where the next wave of uncertainty actually comes from. In terms of dealing with that, there have been a number of approaches we've been looking at. One is to make sure that where there's a lack of data, what we start to do is bring together both people with lived experience and professionals to give a perspective on that and to create a collaborative viewpoint, a shared viewpoint on what the challenges are, what they may be, and possibly ways through them. And then using modern technology to help find chart ways through that. So an AI platform, for example, that'll try and look for global best practice, global good practice, and bring that at pace in an accelerated way using artificial intelligence to those decision makers and people with lived experience, and trying to create a co-produced way through those. Uncertainty, where we go next, nobody knows. But what we do know is to get there, we're stronger in doing that together.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. We'll come back to you in a moment and explore some of those ways forward, because it's very interesting, and we quite often think externally about how we can bring modern technology to the coalface, as it were, but we very rarely necessarily apply it to ourselves in some of the basics of how we work as a sector in sharing best practice and actually understanding what the opportunities going forward might be. So that's an excellent start. Thank you. David, if I can come to you, perhaps you might reflect on, from a Eastbourne Borough Council point of view, some of those challenges over the last few years, and if there are any seeds of success that you see in that, taking that forward.
Really, it's about community coming together, Andrew. We were doing reasonably well until COVID hit. A lot of our income as a council comes from facilities such as the one we're sitting in, our conference facilities, and we're very much a tourist town, and our income comes from events, and that helps to supplement the money we need to spend on vital services such as looking after people who are homeless. COVID came along and we lost a lot of income, so that provided a real challenge for us. But more recently, the cost of living has hit our community hard in the same way as it has Jonathan's. People often think that the southeast of England is a wealthy part of the country, and there are pockets of wealth, but there are also pockets of severe deprivation. Our food bank is the most used in the country.
Wow.
And it saw an exponential increase in people needing its services, an 80% increase in the first 3 months of this year. Just totally off the scale. So it is about working with our communities. We managed to find monies because we overachieved our savings target this year. Managed to put £250,000 into a cost of living emergency fund. We were the first council to declare a cost of living emergency, and we gave 20,000 immediately to Food Bank. But we've also got larders throughout the town. We've got warm places project set up for the winter. So a lot of different things, but it's not just the council, it is the business community who are very strong here and are very supportive of the town as a whole, and the community and voluntary groups.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, that's a phenomenal change, a phenomenal increase in demand. And I mean, John, you've seen things from a whole sector perspective, having worked not just with iESE but with Solace. In that overall picture, is that something that you see some common seeds of A, challenge and B, opportunity in terms of what we're facing at the moment?
I think there are both. The movement to look at how local authorities manage their performance has always been geared to dashboards, metrics, moving from historic data to real-time data. But increasingly, we see authorities hitting troubled times, and it's very difficult to see that coming.
Yep.
So we know that the current management techniques need to evolve to be able to understand more, not just the local authority as an organisation, but how it is working with its community, how that community is reacting to the authority, and seeing that genuinely as a partnership in which active citizens seek to help themselves and work with the council to help the community. So how do you measure that? How do you MOT it? How do you make sure that the best practice we recognise in the awards, in the certificates of excellence, is made available to the industry generally, and that evolves into general practice for the industry at large? Sometimes it goes forward in a single authority, sometimes it's across a number of authorities, but seldom does it reach the entire industry and the sector itself. So we need to look at what's happening, where it's happening, where best practice is, where that can be future-proofed, and then make that available to the whole sector so that they can, in their decision-making processes, as Jonathan referred to, decide whether it's something they need to take into account when they're taking their local decisions to work out what they need to do.
So we've got some fundamental ingredients of success for what is both not just a sustainable council, but a sustainable community in that regard. And some of those solutions, as you say, might be dealing with things in a different way, as you know, the metrics you talked about, where typically as a sector we look in the kind of rear view mirror to see how we were getting on, rather than necessarily looking out the front of the car and seeing where we're trying to go. And that sort of brings us, I think, nicely back to what you were describing, John. I mean, for years the sector, since the early days of what was the Improvement and Development Agency, which was the first organisation really set up to look at those best practices and set up initiatives to share them. We've been on that journey about how to do that better and how to transplant that success better. You mentioned about using new technology. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that and what that might mean for the future of the sector?
We've been working with a number of authorities and charity agencies as well in recent times, given the nature of the challenges and the extent of those, to seek out global best practice but apply it at a local level. To do that, what we've been trying to do is use a technique called Kumu mapping. So we bring together decision makers, professionals, people with lived experience, communities in a collective. We map their perceptions of what's happening and what's important. We can take some measurements of the demographics and the challenges that are there, help the group together create a set of priorities and focus for exploration. And then we set the search engine off, and Spark Beyond is the AI platform that we connect to through pivot projects. And it actively seeks out case studies where there are similar demographics, areas with similar demographics. It will look for case studies where people have already implemented and tried to tackle some of those challenges in a similar way with a similar focus points. It'll seek out best practice and academic research, so academic papers that actively both support and challenge viewpoints. And it'll bring those back. It does 6 years worth of research in about 2 minutes. So it is active learning for all the participants as well. So not only does it create a collaborative engagement and collaborative perception and ownership of the issues, it creates a shared knowledge base as people are going and moving through the process, brings back a suite of potential solutions based on areas with similar demographics where they've tried similar things, and then encourages people in that collective to prioritize those, to choose the pivots that they think will create greatest advantage at greater speed. And then rather than try and build a whole scale policy around it, which is kind of the norm for public sector, actually to take a more agile approach to that, to seek out the experiments, the small pilots that they can make work at pace, and to learn from them at pace. So actually what you do is learn as you go. So it creates learning organizations at the same time. So it's a fascinating process, and one that fundamentally changes the way that local government works and connects to communities.
And there's opportunity within that engagement process for community engagement in the design of those sort of the mind maps of that you use to sieve that best practice.
Absolutely. One of the things that we're building as we speak is a dynamic engagement platform. So you'll never take away, and rightfully so, never take away local members' connection to communities. Local members have always been at the heart of communities, and I'm sure that'll continue. It's their core purpose to a certain extent, to bring the community together and to think about that. But having a digital platform that sits alongside that, doing ongoing engagement, and not just of the usual suspects, but actually actively seeking out the unheard voices at the same time, to bring those together as a collective, to continually bring forward that feedback, that input, but actually at the same time to involve those same groups of people in co-designing solutions based on insights from global best practice. It's an amazing approach that's coming through, and one which the community as well as local government is enjoying and seeing value from quickly.
Fantastic, thanks, John. You've just seen a demonstration of that kind of approach. How do you see that changing the nature of what we do in terms of measuring our performance as a sector or as individually as councils, and allowing us to look out the front of the car to drive it rather than in the rear view mirror? How does that take us forward?
We've tended to have to rely on best practice in historic means. So you're always looking out of the rear view mirror if we're driving a car at what others have done in the past. What Pivot allows you to do is actually in real time carry out research on your wicked issues, which gives you the sum of knowledge available on the web. And by that, you're not just getting UK-based information, it is genuinely global. And it's really interesting when you look at the world at large. And that's not to say there will be areas that aren't covered and hidden, etc. But when you've got that global research brought together in the timescales that Jonathan's referred to, a couple of minutes, you really are able to ask questions about what you're doing today and get the answers today. And that's the power of it. So we're in a new era through that artificial intelligence of being able to apply the sum of the knowledge to a hyper-local issue cost effectively. It's never been there before. So it is the beginning of a new era. There's a process that Jonathan's talked about that has to be gone through to make sure everybody's involved, engaged, that the question is right. But when it looks behind things, the example I saw was housing, and it immediately identified the relationship with poverty and those other issues that were coming out, the professionals, the lived experience people, the academia, importantly elected members, the community themselves. The power of this tool is absolutely immense. And I think as we begin to, as Jonathan said, learn how to use it, we're going to see some really interesting solutions coming forward. We know local government innovates. We know local government has gone through the terrible time that it's been through and survived on its innovation. We know that it is struggling financially.
Yep.
We know it was struggling before the pandemic, before Brexit, with escalating need and constrained resources. So it needs all the help it can get, but it needs that at the time the practitioners are making their decisions, the members are making their decisions, and to bring everything into real time is a crucial moment.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the sort of the changes you mentioned at the ground level, David, you know, with the growth in the need for food locally in the community. I mean, we know those, as essential as they are to respond as quickly as possible, they are the sticking plaster, and actually what we need are those long-term solutions that make both the sustainable community and the sustainable council. So in terms of that, there's been lots of interesting research and experimentation. I mean, Hilary Cotham's work, for example. How will the iESE research programme, in terms of the community catalyst, how is that going to leverage what Jonathan and his team done to try and move that forward, so we've got something that can be transplanted from area to area? Can you say a little bit about that?
It's undoubtedly the case that the role of the community working with their local authority is becoming more and more important. The fact that we need and have seen active citizens, the volunteering through the pandemic was an incredible phenomenon that was across the country, across all local authorities. And it shows that there is a latent capacity within the community that, when tapped into, and you've referred to it, David, it's a powerhouse.
Yep.
And it does mean that local authorities have got to decide where they target their resources. It does mean that on occasions they've got to step out the way, get out the way, and provide the community with the resources, the means to do it themselves. But it can't be abdication. It's got to be participative democracy. It's got to be within the role that local authorities and its members are driving forward in terms of the strategic direction. But it does have to deal with economies of scale and scope and hyper-local issues together.
Yep.
And the challenge has always been large organisations have economies of scale, small organisations are agile.
Yep.
Well, we need that now to work together, and an authority is a means of bringing the large and the small together and brokering arrangements which allow them to effectively play to their strengths, but combine that strength to impact locally for the community.
Yep.
And so we're starting to see local authorities using their budgets to much greater effect with their local economies, with the creation of jobs, their supply chain, to impact locally. And all of the sum of that is scattered across local authorities at the moment. So the best practice is out there, but in bits. And iESE is a vehicle for bringing that together and showcasing that, so that authorities can see what the authority of the future may look like,
Yep.
what its component parts might be, and they can consider whether any part of that is right for them at the time they're making decisions, so they take their decisions with full knowledge,
Yep.
rather than take the decisions on the seat of their pants, or intuitively,
Yep.
or based on the best experience they've got.
So some of those issues are issues that we've dealt with before, but we need to look at them again, and we need to look at them in the context of as much experience in the world that we can gather. I mean, you mentioned regeneration as a part of that. We've got a session this afternoon on regeneration, which John will be leading, and that will start to explore some of those issues. One of the other clear, perhaps the wave that's been behind all of these waves is around sustainability from an environmental perspective. You know, we see that as a key driver of migration in the world. We see it as a key driver of the release of pandemics. So, I mean, I was in a session with the World Health Organization representatives a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying, well, actually, the time between coronavirus 1 and coronavirus 2 was 10 years. The time between 2 and 3 was 7 years. So you wouldn't be surprised if actually there was a brand new coronavirus in 5 years' time, you know, and we aren't even out of the current one. So we need to start standing back and saying, how do we live alongside this? But also, more fundamentally, we need to think very, very deeply, and at the time we're going through COP again, how we actually manage some of those, not just mitigations, but actually start to kind of rebuild some of the environment that we've got. And some of that, of course, is around decarbonisation, that approach. So as an individual, you know, you're a borough council in the southeast of England. How do you, as a council, grapple some of those issues, and what are you contributing to, as you were, help the sector to try and move some of that forward, David?
Well, we've been very tied into the sort of a green agenda for a decade now, so it's not something new for us. And we bring together through our strategic plan a number of key issues so that it's holistic. We mentioned the poverty that some of our people suffer from. We put solar panels on our council housing stock back in 2010. And that's given the tenants there free daytime electricity, as well as giving an income back to the council. We're now retrofitting homes so that the insulation is far better and the power so much better, with the increasing cost of fuel and energy. That's really essential to us. But we also work very closely, again, with the voluntary sector and with the organisations who are campaigning on green issues. So I'll be here again on Friday in this very room for an Eco Summit. And that is run by East One Eco Action, but this particular summit is aimed at businesses to help businesses to understand how their actions can help to reduce the carbon footprint of the town, help us towards what we've set as a decarbonisation, a carbon neutrality target of 2030 for the town, but also to save those businesses money. And there'll be a lot of professionals here that can help them with that way forward.
Excellent, thank you. And that sustainability from an environmental perspective is interesting, that's sort of starting to show that doing things well environmentally actually is taking some important costs out of the shopping basket of key members of our community. It's not a either or. It's not a take away the green cost of greening from, for example, energy in order to allow a better cost of living. Actually, you can invest more and actually create a reduced cost of living, which is a great to see. So we've got a few sessions later on today around big picture in terms of sustainability, and also something around the use of different technologies to affect things at the local level. So that's a really interesting thread, I think, for us over the next day and a half. John, we kind of talked with Jonathan Huish around the use of digital and technology. We've done a little bit of the research around that in terms of the community before, haven't we? So what is it around, the digital and technology that we might come to in both opportunities and threats? Is this something we've forgotten given the presence of the pandemic and all of the other crises we have, or is it something that's still front and centre?
I think it is front and centre. I think the smart cities initiatives are starting to take hold worldwide. I think the idea of local authorities as a digital platform, playing their part for local communities in an ethical, moral and trusted way is really important. I think data analytics is powerful. I think what's now started to happen is the tools to deal with data and digital platforms are becoming easier to use and cheaper. The idea of low code and other solutions coming forward provide a Lego kit so you can start to build your solutions in days, weeks, not months and years, not spending millions of pounds. I think the ability to use the rich data that local authorities have is key. What a member knows about their patch, turning that into information that can be used by everybody is a very powerful thing. And unlike, you might say, government politics, local authorities have, by and large, retained the trust of their communities. And so their communities and individuals in those communities are prepared to let them use data, their data, and use that to best effect. Bearing in mind, we're still seeing, on occasions, an ambulance turn up to help somebody at their home and not having access to their records. Yep. We're still seeing, a refuse worker finding milk outside a residence, knowing it's an older person and being able to feed that back as a first warning that something in that person's behaviour has changed. Yep. So there's a powerful use of data, there's a powerful way of analysing that and making it intelligence that the authorities can use, and that's becoming increasingly something that is accessible because the tools and the technology are becoming cheaper. Allied to that is that technology is not just the virtual world. The local authorities have always had that physical Meals on Wheels, refuse collection, pest control all those other physical services. And they're now starting to be supported by not just artificial intelligence, not just softwares, they're becoming now apps, so that's making that easier, but robotics, assistive technology, the ability to lift a person in a bed with some technology that saves your back, saves your legs, stops you wearing out, injuring yourself during the course of your daily work. These are powerful things that are coming through into local government generally, and the more we can make those accessible at the point where they're needed, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's obviously from our perspective also one of the areas that we need to face new challenges. We know that over the last few years, more than a dozen councils have had complete denial of their digital services through successful cyber attacks, and the Internet of Things that relates to some of those care technologies creates a whole new surface upon which attacks are possible and largely undefended. So part of the research that we're doing in creating a local public service cyber centre of excellence, where we're drawing together expertise from across the cyber industry in the UK, is to look at some of those challenges and not just write reports, but to create and bring together the solutions. So we already have some new technologies which are generationally different and create real defence rather than just detection. And we want to extend that across the whole attack surface. David, from your point of view, have you let up on the digital side, or is that something that you still press the pedal to the floor?
I don't think you dare let up on the digital side. You mentioned the cyber attacks. I think there's the figure's something like 10,000 cyber attacks on local government every day. And a lot of those are just phishing expeditions, but some of them end up with real problems. I mean, Copeland, Redcar, Cleveland, millions of pounds of cost putting things back together again. But it's the disruption, it's not being able to access key IT facilities, payroll, customer services, and the delay that it takes getting things back up and running. So no, we haven't. As you know, Andrew, we've bought into AppGuard, which it gives us greater protection than any of the other software that we had, security software that we had in the past, because of the way that it operates. But I think over half of local authorities are now buying in external expertise, and there's a big disparity around how much local authorities are investing in that. Some very little, some considerably, probably more than they actually need to. And it's a question of getting the right tools to ensure that you've got a safe environment and that you're using the digital platforms in the way that they serve your community.
So we have got a sort of a challenge there, but actually meeting that challenge actually gives us some great opportunities in terms of new ways to protect the people that are our support network, which is beyond our staff into the community, but also new solutions for those communities themselves. Jonathan, coming back to yourself in terms of the artificial intelligence platform, the next steps, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about Community Catalyst and what we want to do there in terms of creating a model which we might then use to replicate authority by authority what their hyperlocal way forward is.
So very much the idea is about what all of us see and value in communities, bringing them together with decision makers, partner agencies, stakeholders, engaging and getting participation with those, building informed communities as well. So helping the communities understand the exact nature of the art of the possible, working with those to understand their needs, their drivers, the things that would help them most, bring them together as a system with the decision makers to help define the questions, help build the questions that they need answers to, the solutions that they're looking for, the solutions that will mean most to them, and then using artificial intelligence, that platform, to go and seek ways at pace of helping build those. and then working with those communities to find those areas where we might pilot different ways of working, different solutions at a hyperlocal level, to learn from those and then build a more sustainable community moving forwards. But not just to do that as a one-off, to create a dynamic platform that means that we're doing this on an ongoing basis, so that community views, community input is always being monitored, so that when it starts to say, actually, there's a shift in need, it's picked up rather than 6 months later or a year later, or doing a standard consultation that an authority might do. It's picked up immediately, so that both the community and the local authority and the wider sector and stakeholders can come together immediately to start looking at solutions to that, so that you build a truly resilient community. And more importantly, in so doing, to try and help communities get to a space where actually it starts to reduce dependency on public services, always the public service will be there to support that space, but it means the communities become resilient and start doing things more and more for themselves that they're able to.
So we can, if I can paraphrase, we can get those communities and their representatives in the room. We can get some experts in the issues that those communities say are the ones that are important to them. We can use that to build a model which will then go and find the best practice in very rapid time, and then we can play out some of that locally to see which solutions fit and work, and then feed the results back in the model and refine and improve. Yeah.
So it's continual learning for everybody concerned, and actually it maximises potential at speed.
And some of those issues, of course, are going to be, even though they play out slightly differently locally, they're going to be common across the whole country, in fact, across the globe, some of them. So how does that work? How does it hook those together? Or do they just run in parallel?
So, well, both, to be frank. In lots of ways, some areas will want to really seek those things and work through them themselves. But also at the same time, that's playing into global best practice, because the anticipation is that you share that learning as you go. And I know across a number of specific themes, you talked about energy earlier. In a number of those themes, actually people are coming together across the globe in communities of practice on the back of that learning to share ways forward.
And some of those questions are quite complex. I mean, some of the sort of the questions you must get asked are kind of fine for simpler, procurement-based or other sort of system-based questions. That's fine, but this is very, very complex. At the edge of our ability to frame the question, how well does it really cope with those kind of complex, wicked issues?
It actually deals better with those because it deals with ambiguity and uncertainty. By creating that shared mind map at the front end, actually what you've got is probably at a local level the strongest definition of what the issue might be, both in data terms and in perception terms, which means that all of the issues that we deal with are interrelated at one level. They are complex, there's uncertainty built into them, and they're hugely volatile. The number of nodes that you can bring together is immeasurable. So, for example, we have a local government map emerging, looking at communities, sustainability and flourishing communities, participation engagement, that already has circa 200 nodes in it. It's more than the human mind can cope with at one point in time. And with time, uncertainty and change, they flux hugely. The system can deal with that through artificial intelligence in a way that we can't, and build responses to it faster. So actually, it's in some ways better at dealing with the complex issues than the simple.
So that sounds like it could bring some revolution to the best practice sharing side of things, which I would suggest has largely stayed the same for the history of local government, really. Do you think, John?
I think it has. I think it lags behind because case studies are used. And so what this approach gives us is an opportunity to shift that into real time and connect it to decision making. As importantly is its ability to bring global knowledge. I really do think the international dimension to problem solving is a powerful one, because local government, unlike government, doesn't have armies. It supports its communities worldwide, and it is about the fabric of life. And therefore, if there is best practice out there, wherever that best practice is, bringing it together so it can be applied if it's appropriate in a local situation is just a very powerful tool. So we've always had a premium on gathering best practice, and we know that award ceremonies, certificates of excellence are a powerful way of showcasing what is happening within the industry and giving it some recognition and reward and allowing the people doing it to be able to talk about what they're doing. And that is a very powerful part of what we're doing in this conference. But the ability to see round the corner, to see what's coming, to analyse trends, to future-proof, so to not just have best practice but have future practice, I think is a very powerful thing. Of course, it'll be fuzzy around the edges. As Jonathan has said, it will constantly refine itself. And as the network gets bigger and the amount of knowledge that it's handling gets bigger, so it becomes more refined. So I think we're really starting to put ourselves in a new era.
So we're turning that corner. We're getting the global best practice. We're having a huge opportunity, and certainly from what we've seen in working for other local governments around the world in terms of what they do, there's some absolutely fascinating uses of technology, approaches to the environmental challenges, which we can frankly steal the ideas and bring them back here. But that also, we need to get better at helping each other transplant, in a practical sense, solutions from one place to another. I mean, David, I know that when you do things in Eastbourne, you tend to make arrangements that collaborate, that allow collaboration to expand. Maybe you can say something a little bit about that in terms of your ambitions.
Yeah, we never claim to have original thought. We're very good at picking up on ideas that come from other places and then developing those and working in a collaborative sense with the people who came up with the ideas to implant them as part of our DNA. And that's been very successful for the town. I've always enjoyed the Innovation Club from iESE and the opportunities to go to other places. Every time I've come back from a visit, we've brought back ideas with us, and we've stayed in contact with those authorities so that we can develop the ideas further. And that can be right across the range. It can be from housing to supporting children with special needs. And we've got examples of all of those things, Andrew.
Yes, it is fantastic, and I do think that is one of the things that we as a sector are very, very good at, and actually this increased knowledge will just make that even more powerful. We're just drawing this session to a close, and hopefully this is setting the scene for the rest of the conference. So we've got some really clear themes coming out of there in terms of the approach to digitally transforming the council, and we've got a session coming up on rolling transformation and how we apply technology in an era where we don't have the money or time to fail, where we've got some key environmental challenges, but actually, as David has said, can be both solutions environmentally, but solutions to some of the challenges to those of our communities as well, and those future scenarios bring their own challenges around things like cybersecurity. But again, if we can break those problems down, learn those lessons and share them, then we really have got a solution, and together we can help transplant those lessons and make practical progress as a sector in a way that I think other sectors perhaps challenge themselves to do so. So we've got talks coming up today, next around digital technology and data insight. After the breakout session, we've got rolling transformation, and then through community enablement and regeneration, and finishing at the same time with the session on cybersecurity. So a lot to pack in today. Just to cap off the work that Jonathan and John have been doing around creating research models to find those new solutions. We are evolving that, and if you want to get involved in being a part of the pilot to create a new model for how we build the vision of the future council, and continually keep that up to date, then please do get in touch. You know, this is a new way of working, and we want to apply the same challenges to our approach to gathering and creating best practice as we do in our engagement with our communities in the front line. And we do intend that it is something that is available to every council in the country with a template to be able to use to face and manage its issues. So if it's of interest to you, get in touch and we will roll you into the research programme. If you will and want to pick it up at a later stage, we can arrange for that too. So we're in the early discovery phase about what I think is a new generation of sharing best practice for the sector. You've heard it here first. This session is just drawing to a close, and we will continue these themes in the breakout sessions to come. Thank you.